Hey guys, welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business, all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. Today we are covering protein powder and the many uses of it, the many types of it, and how to know what your best options are when looking into this vast supplement market.
So if you've ever walked down the protein powder aisle and been completely overwhelmed, you are not alone. That is most people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think before we chat about the protein powder, we should probably just recap quickly, why protein's important.
Mm-hmm.
So protein is going to be the macronutrient that specifically helps rebuild things, whether that's muscle tissue, whether that's, mechanics of the cell itself. Your body needs protein in just about everything that it does.
Right.
But especially when it comes to repairing muscle tissue and refueling after a workout.
Right, because the whole purpose of going to the gym is breaking down muscle tissue.
Yes.
And so since protein is the building blocks of muscle, it makes sense that we supply the body with more protein after workout.
Yeah.
And so protein powder has become a very...
Sorry, one more thing. I have one more thing to add. Well, just as a reminder, how much protein you should be taking in, right?
Sure, yeah.
So we usually go based on, I was going to go there, but then you jumped in. Okay, so we usually recommend about 1 gram per pound of current body weight or ideal body weight, whether you're looking to lose weight or gain weight.
Depends how lean you are.
Yeah, it does depend on how lean you are. You can also go by, lean tissue, but to keep things simple and to keep things easy, about 1 gram per pound.
Yeah, it's a good starting point. It works for just about anybody that's not morbidly obese, because that's where you get into a point where they're way over their normal body weight, so we don't need that much protein. But not going into those details, 1 gram per pound is great.
Yeah.
So where I was going with
you were saying protein powders.
Specifically
the uses of it.
Yeah, so the uses of it. So it's become this really popular supplement because fitness is so much more a priority for so many people. They hear about protein being this big important thing, and not all proteins are created equally. So first thought that goes through a lot of people's minds is, I know I need to get more protein in my diet, so I'm going to go pick up a protein powder.
Mm-hmm.
And they get to the store, they get to GNC, and they've got whoever's working there telling them what the latest and greatest is.
They're trying to sell you products. I just want you guys to know they're not necessarily experts on nutritional supplements. A lot of times they're people who just like to work out, think they know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say none of them do, but again, they work in a store that's trying to sell you something.
Right. I'm sure there's some good ones out there.
Yeah, I'm sure there are good employees and people who know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, they're going to have whatever is newest on the top of their mind. So they might not always know what's going to be the most beneficial for you specifically.
Yeah. And before we dive into that, I'm going to state that we're not getting into any brands specifically in this episode.
So that's what you're looking for.
We're going to be
about that.
Going more into the types of protein themselves, why we would use them, and what our objectives are with a protein powder. So the main uses of a protein powder are post-workout shake, increase overall protein intake, and then potentially as a snack or meal replacement in conjunction with something else.
To offer more convenience.
Right.
So we're talking about, repair and recovery. We're talking about just meeting your overall needs. And then we're talking about making your life a little bit easier.
Right. So I think starting out, post-workout shake is the first thing everyone thinks of. If you are getting a protein powder, this is probably the reason why you're doing it. And sure, it might include the other two as well. But post-workout shake, why do we use protein powder for post-workout?
Well, so we did discuss this a little bit in our last podcast,
mm-hmm.
right? It was the last one, about optimizing your kind of training time, right? So we know one of the biggest things is utilizing your body's receptiveness. Is that a word?
I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, just that your body is more receptive to those nutrients post-workout.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say utilizing your training window because that's or that like window afterwards, because there really isn't one.
You can
but,
say that. You can say that.
We really want to utilize the stress that's been placed on your muscle during that workout by getting something soon after the workout to start the recovery process and start the repair process. The benefit of using a powder is that protein has already been broken down to a point that your body is going to digest it a lot quicker and a lot easier, because we also know that training slows digestion down, and it does make it a little bit harder for your body to run through like a chicken breast.
Exactly.
So those would be the two main reasons to use a protein powder post-workout.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get nutrients to that broken down muscle tissue as quickly as possible. And in that post-workout window, the muscle has preferential treatment for any nutrients that come in. So the faster we can get it there, the better. So now the next logical question is, okay, so what's the best kind of protein to do that? So obviously, if something's broken down into a powder, we've already gone through that mechanical breakdown stage that happens in your mouth that other proteins would have to go through, like a chicken or steak or whatever. So we're already beyond that. But the actual protein itself also digests a lot differently when we get into the gut. So now, what are some of the more advantageous types of proteins when we're talking about a post-workout shake, and more specifically, the fast side of the protein digestion?
Yeah, so it's important to know that different proteins break down at different speeds in the body. So it takes your body, less time to run through certain types of protein. Those proteins being whey protein specifically. And if you want to break it down even further, something like an isolate. Is that where you're going with this question?
Yeah, isolate. Hydrolysate.
So, when you break down whey protein specifically, there are even different types of whey protein available to you, going back to how much they have processed it.
Right.
So an isolate would be like the very, very, very bare bones version of a whey protein, where you're just getting the protein. You're not getting any milk solids. You're not really getting any of the other dairy particles or dairy proteins in that, just the whey.
Right. And so what's the example that you're giving there that has all those extras in it?
Concentrate.
Right.
So concentrate is a version that has some of those milk solids still left in it, which there isn't a huge difference. I don't know, you might argue with this. I don't believe there's a huge difference between the isolate and the concentrate. I think the biggest reason that you might choose an isolate is to get more protein per scoop, basically. Yeah, for volume of powder used. And then the other reason might be you're kind of sort of sensitive to dairy, where an isolate would give you like the cleanest version of something that's not going to upset your stomach.
Right. Exactly. So if we're looking at a whey protein, you've basically got 3 different tiers to it. So tier 1 is going to be your whey protein concentrate. And that's where there's more of the milk solids in there with the actual whey protein itself. Step number 2 is going to be your whey protein isolate. And so that's where the whey protein is isolated. So isolate, there we go.
Just the whey protein.
And then step 3 is the hydrolysate, or hydrolysate, or however you want to pronounce it.
I actually don't know that much about this.
And this is the whey protein isolate broken down even further. So now we're getting almost like a pre-digested protein in the third tier there that is the fastest digesting derivative of whey. And so this is something that I would only even look into if you're like a top tier athlete, super competitive person. Honestly, I don't even really use it. I typically stick to isolate because there's probably a 2% difference there, if at all.
Again, like super, super high performance.
Yeah, it might not even really matter.
Yeah.
But that's going to be more expensive because there's a lot more going on to get it to that production level.
More processing is involved.
Right.
And at the same, for the same reason, concentrates tend to be cheaper than isolates.
Exactly.
So most often, if you just go out and purchase a whey protein product without really looking into it, more than likely you're going to end up with a concentrate because it's the cheapest and most widely available.
Absolutely.
But again, if you're not really worried about the volume of protein powder and you don't have any issues with dairy, a whey concentrate is going to be the best option for you.
It'll be fine. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best.
Well, but I mean, if you're balancing cost effectiveness with what you're getting out of it, I think
Sure.
it tends to be.
So, yeah, and that's a totally fair recommendation. I typically say if you're looking for a protein powder, I would recommend, and you're going for a whey protein, I would recommend the first ingredient to be whey isolate. Or you can go the hydrolysate route if you wanted to. But if whey isolate is the first ingredient, that means it's the largest by weight in the total product itself. So you're getting mostly that. Where certain companies will try to sell you is they have this isolate blend, and then you check on the back, and the first ingredient is actually a whey protein concentrate. That means they're actually using more of the cheap stuff than that expensive stuff that's probably on the front of the label.
Yeah, and you're probably paying a higher price point for something that is really not worth it in the end.
Right. So if you're trying to get the highest purity, highest value, maybe the value could be argued, but I typically say stick to a whey protein isolate as the first ingredient. And so post-workout shake, we want this fast digesting protein. We're going to immediately initiate that recovery process, increase protein synthesis really rapidly, but there's also benefits to including a slower digesting protein in your post-workout shake too. And so this all goes back to that lengthened recovery process and keeping protein synthesis elevated for a longer period of time. Protein synthesis being the time that you're actually building muscle tissue back up.
Yeah, because we've discussed how strength training workouts are going to, stimulate your metabolism for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
You have that repair process and recovery process going on, 24 to 48 hours after that strength training workout, meaning that your muscles are still more receptive to some of those proteins. They need more of that protein.
Right.
So by including a slower digesting protein, you're really taking advantage of that full window of time that your muscles are still trying to repair.
Exactly. Because if you just have that really fast digesting isolate in there, you can see protein synthesis spike and then fall off, kind of like a blood sugar curve. Whereas if we keep that slower digesting protein in on the back end, then you're going to get that benefit for a much longer duration. Another option, if you don't want to go the route of having two separate proteins or a protein blend, is doing your post-workout shake and then following up with another meal an hour or an hour and a half later, because that's when that, and I could have my timing slightly off here, but that's probably when that protein synthesis is going to start to come down from that faster digesting source. So if you back that up with another meal, you're going to have that extended benefit from, of course, the protein that you're including in that meal.
Yeah, and I would say that that's probably the route that most people would choose to take.
Yeah.
I think that including a slower digesting protein is probably the most valuable to somebody looking to put on more muscle mass, or for somebody who struggles with excess muscle soreness.
Yeah.
So I would say that those would be the two, major reasons that you might want to look into adding a slower digesting protein. But if you're just kind of looking for general recovery, you would probably be fine just to stick with that one quick digesting protein.
Right. And for 99% of people, having just one protein powder of really just about any type is going to be just fine.
Yeah.
This episode, we're really just talking about the minutia, like the tiny little differences. And some are a little bit more substantial than others. But in most of these cases, if you were to just go out, buy a regular whey protein, you're going to be just fine for pretty much any instance.
Definitely.
So next up, after our post-workout shake, another reason to have a protein powder is just increase your protein overall. And
so if you're somebody who doesn't like to eat meat, which I find
with vegetarians,
a lot of clients, well, honestly, for vegetarians, you have to use a protein powder. I'm sorry, you have to use a protein powder. You are not getting enough protein unless you are spending hours every week doing very detailed meal planning and meal prep.
Yes.
Which I know you're not, because nobody has time for that. So if you're a vegetarian, you do absolutely need to have a protein powder on hand to use to supplement your intake. What were we talking about? Just increasing your protein intake for the day. But for the normal person, okay, so non-vegetarian people, if you don't love the taste of meat, or you find that, eating the volume that's recommended to you is just a little difficult right now, having a protein powder to fall back on, I think is a good idea, especially using it, to potentially replace a snack or replace a smaller meal sometime during the day where you would be asked to eat more protein and you just don't want to for whatever reason.
Right.
So if that's the situation, I think that's the best bet.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that this is a protein supplement.
Yes.
So even if your protein seems to be really high and hard to hit, we do want to encourage more of that protein to be coming from whole food sources.
I would much rather it be coming from actual food.
Yes.
And so I usually recommend protein powder in this situation as a supplement, as a short-term solution.
Right.
Because the idea would be, for us to try and increase your food sources of protein, whether that's adding in more plant-based protein with your meat sources or however we need to stack those foods up. But again, if we have a goal to hit, using this supplement as it's intended to be used is a good idea.
Yeah. The rule of thumb I try to stick with my clients is no more than a quarter of their protein intake coming from supplements per day.
Yeah.
And so that
I usually I say 1 to 2 servings depending on what their calorie level is.
Right. So the quarter of body weight at max tends to scale pretty well, used from a supplement form. And there's a lot of reasons why we recommend this. The most important being that you'll be much more satiated through the day if you're actually eating real food.
Yes.
Because like we talked about with the whey protein in the post-workout window, the reason why it's so advantageous is because it's already broken down.
Yes.
And so you're skipping that part of the digestion phase. Whereas if we've got whole food sources through the rest of the day where we're trying to keep hunger at bay through 3-4 hour stretches between meals, we don't want things to just burn up and be used up instantly.
So by having a real food protein source, it's filling your stomach more. You're getting a little bit more volume there. Mm-hmm. But then you also have the benefit of that slow digestion time.
Right.
So please do not try and just drink shakes all day, every day, and think that that's going to be, a sustainable way to do things.
Yeah, if your goal is 200 grams of protein in a day and 120 are coming from shakes, you're doing it wrong.
Nope.
You don't want that. It'll wreck your gut too. It's not going to feel good.
That's another thing I think, that I would love to talk about is ingredients in protein powder can be not the greatest.
Yeah.
And if you already have a sensitive stomach or if you already have, issues with your digestive system, you would probably be best sticking to whole food sources altogether or really limiting your intake of protein powder because a lot of them are going to contain certain ingredients, gums and gels and artificial sweeteners and things that might not settle well with you. There are clean versions out there that you can try out, but at the end of the day, your body would rather digest whole food protein sources.
Definitely.
So if you have any sensitivities or any issues, try to use it sparingly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our third reason for using a protein powder is as a snack, a meal replacement. And so this, we kind of got in an argument about this beforehand. But so with a protein powder, I think there are certain instances where you can use it as just a standalone snack. And that also, a lot of that comes down to what type that you're using will be more beneficial than others. Alexa has a totally different idea of this. But my thoughts on it, first of all, if you're just using whey protein powder, that can absolutely be a snack. It's fine. You're going to survive. It's not a big deal. If you're really trying to optimize things, then going back to the whole reason why we like whole foods as the majority of your protein is we still want to keep you satiated for longer. So if we can get a slower digesting protein in as a snack, we're going to be able to keep you satiated for longer. Or if this is like before bed, that's where you see these recommendations for a casein protein. Mm-hmm. A slow digesting protein, it's going to be giving you a release of amino acids for hours and hours and hours, and that's going to help slow protein degradation. It's going to help keep you fuller longer and more satisfied. So what was your counterpoint to
So a couple things.
The protein snacks
So
here?
I'm all about building better habits, and the thing is, using a protein powder in one-off situations as a really quick meal or snack, I get it. I would rather you have a protein powder than nothing. Like, I would always rather you eat something than nothing. Okay? I just want that to be said. But if we're starting to use protein powder as a crutch or, like thinking that we can avoid the whole planning and preparing aspect of our week because, we have a protein powder we can just use, that's what starts to spiral into bad habits, is what I think.
I agree with you there completely.
And this is really just in this is in those snack situations or those one-off situations. I don't believe that you should ever use a protein shake alone as a meal replacement. It's not a complete meal. It's only protein. You're not going to be satisfied. You're not going to be full. And it's just not going to work out for you long term. So if you're trying to make protein powder into a meal replacement, you should always, always, always be adding a carb source, a fat source, and potentially a fiber source to make it actually a complete meal. For one, a protein powder is going to be too low in calories to be a meal anyway. But then you also have the fact that your body's going to run through it too quickly. You're going to get hungry sooner. That could start, that could trigger some cravings. It just puts you in a bad position long term. So don't use it alone as a meal replacement. If you're using it as a meal or a snack, just be careful that it doesn't turn into a habit or something you're relying on to get you out of doing the right thing.
Right. And no, so I 100% agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
The caveat being, if for whatever reason you have a particular point in your day where a snack needs to be had and a protein shake is the easiest way to go about it,
again,
and you've planned
totally
your day
agree.
out to incorporate that, then a protein shake can be a totally fine snack. And if you're really trying to optimize it, using that slower digesting source like a casein can really be a good way to go.
That's the other thing too, is I think it's unrealistic that people have more than one protein powder on hand. But I understand that some people do, and if that's you, great. This is a great time to use it.
I did,
but
it for
I'm not.
years.
I know you did, but you also had 500 supplements that you were taking for years too. So
yeah,
you were an over supplementer.
That was in my past.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. So by the way, yes, we have one type of protein powder in the cabinet.
Wasn't a problem.
Yes, I get that, but. That's the other thing, too, is, if you already have it on hand, this is a great place to use it, but don't feel like you need to go out and purchase it specifically for this situation. When you could just, I don't know, maybe have something else to snack on with your whey protein shake. Literally anything else. If you just put, 1 second of thought into it, you would be fine.
Fair enough.
So, again, it would just take so much more time and effort for you to go out and buy casein protein than it would to just, grab some almonds or grab a fruit or grab literally anything.
Not if you have Amazon send it to you.
I mean, I guess. But anyway.
So, Anything else you want to say on protein powder?
Oh, well, yeah. I feel like we should cover, literally all of the other options you have. So, I mean, there are so many other...
So, there's more to say.
Yeah, there's more to say. So, again... Let's say you're sensitive to dairy products, right? So even a hydrolysate, even an isolate, is kind of pushing the boundaries of what your body can tolerate.
Sure.
Okay, sure. Then your best options could be, there's a few, right? We can go plant-based. We can go the plant-based route. I don't personally recommend soy to anybody just because it can have other negative effects on the body. You have egg proteins available. You have beef proteins available. So any of those 3 options could be used if you have a dairy sensitivity.
And then there's pea and rice proteins as well.
Well, that's what I would group into just plant-based protein.
Right.
Most of the plant-based proteins you'll find out there are pea and rice blends, just because most companies try to keep their plant-based products gluten-free and allergen-friendly. So pea and rice is going to be the most common, which people tend to tolerate pretty well, I think. The one thing you should know about plant-based proteins, though, is because it's coming from a plant source. It's just if you were relying on plants to get all of your protein, you would have to eat a lot more of them. Plant-based protein powders, typically the powder volume is more.
Right.
So it's more powder for less protein per scoop. So you also have to keep that in mind. If you think that you want to try out a plant-based protein powder, but you don't necessarily need one, just expect to have a lot of powder, which...
Yeah, I think most plant proteins are actually 2 scoops per serving.
Yes, it's 2 scoops, and some of them are only 15 grams.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking okay, I could get 1 scoop that's got 20 to 25 grams, or I need to take 2 scoops and it's only getting me 15 grams, that's something to consider. A lot of plant proteins also have kind of a chalky texture.
Yeah.
So another thing to keep in mind... Not to say that, dairy proteins can't. Beef protein also has a weird texture. Do you remember we tried that?
Yeah, beef's a little strange.
It's very, very fine powder, like a very fine powder. But it is an option. What was the other one we said? Egg protein. Yeah. So where do beef and egg proteins fall on the scale of like quick versus slow digesting? I actually don't know that.
Egg white is the second fastest digesting behind whey.
Good to know.
So egg white is incredibly fast digesting. And then the beef, I don't really know where that falls on the scale. I think it's behind those two, the whey, then egg, and then beef. I'm sure it's mid-range in there somewhere. So it's
plant-based tends to be mid-range too.
Yeah.
It's definitely not fast, but it's also not as slow as casein. So plant protein is kind of in the middle as well.
Right. So casein's your slowest. And so what about like the bone broth protein?
Yeah. So I was just about to say that's kind of the last one too. That's good. It's allergen friendly and it's actually incredibly good for your gut. So collagen-based proteins or bone broth-based proteins, gelatin, sorry, I can't talk, based proteins. I think the jury's still out on whether your body actually
does anything with it.
Does anything with collagen protein specifically. Just because, again, your body is going to break down any protein source into its respective amino acids and use it accordingly. So I don't know if the benefit is coming from the actual, like, breakdown of the amino acids from the collagen protein, because again, your body's just going to break it down no matter what. So I don't know if it's like these specific amino acids that are supposed to be more beneficial, but science hasn't really given us a direct answer on that, and it tends to be pretty expensive. So I don't know. I want to say don't waste your money, but I know that some people have seen a lot of wonders with their skin and with their gut health and things like that. I do think that there's a benefit to gelatin and in some of those bone broth proteins, again, for more of those gut healing effects. So those are other good options too, if you want something that's not dairy-based. That potentially has some other benefits.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So you have a lot of options. I know it's a lot to navigate. They're going to come at a ton of different price points as well. So again, the whey protein is typically the cheapest out there. And it's only going to go up from there. I mean, obviously there are some plant-based proteins that are still affordable, and egg white proteins as well. Yeah. But beef tends to be a little bit more expensive. Any of those bone broth or collagen-based ones are more expensive. So yeah.
Yeah, and you'll also see some blends too. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of if you can find a good blended protein that has a few of each of those, from the fast digesting spectrum to the slow digesting spectrum, because that's really a flexible supplement to be able to use.
Yeah.
And you'll find some that are better than others. With those, I still recommend that same order that we talked about before, with whey isolate being the first ingredient, and then with the rest stacked behind that. But of course, if you've got any sort of dairy issues, then going the plant route, or you can try the beef isolate route and experiment with it. So if you've got some sort of digestive issue with one, there might be something else that works better. So if you've only tried one or two options, don't necessarily feel like protein powder isn't something you can do. There's probably something out there that will work a little bit better for you.
Well, and also keep in mind, again, that it could come back to the other ingredients, and it might not be the protein source specifically. It could be, and that's common, but it could also be the other ingredients that have been mixed into it. So if, whey is something that didn't work for you the first time around, looking for something that's a very clean whey product, or something that doesn't have a lot of those other ingredients like artificial sweeteners and a lot of the gums and things like that. That would be the first place I would start personally, and then kind of transitioning towards, anything non-dairy.
Yeah. And as a personal anecdote, I actually digest protein a lot better if I eat it with something else. So it's it's like 50-50. If I have protein powder just by itself and nothing else in the next couple hours, if my stomach's going to hurt. Whereas if I have a protein powder with something, no issues whatsoever. So
sounds like another reason to not just have a protein shake alone by itself.
Yeah, maybe. In some instances,
just saying.
That makes sense. So yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. And if there's anything you'd like us to cover in the future, feel free to reach out to myself at hypertrofit.com. You can find Alexa at therootedrd.com, and we will see you again next week.
We'll see you guys next week.